Okay, in this video we're just going to continue to look at the PPF and some concepts related to opportunity cost, including why the PPF is bowed outwards, why does the PPF slope downwards. So that's a really key one that people struggle with. There's a difference between why it's bowed outwards and why it slopes downwards. So that idea of sloping downwards, a PPF that looks like this, or a PPF that looks like this, the more diagonal PPF, both of these curves, this one here, one, and number two here, bad 1 and 2, I'm not going to draw anymore, are both examples of curves sloping downwards. The reason they slope downwards has nothing to do with resources being allocated more to one good or service. It's because every decision involves a trade-off. So the more we produce of the product on the y-axis, the less of the product we're producing on the x-axis, and vice versa. The more of your product you produce along the x-axis, the more you go down your graph on the y-axis. The reason for that is because we have scarce resources, and therefore every decision involves a trade-off and has an opportunity cost. So that's why the PPF slopes downwards. It's bowed outwards because opportunity cost varies. If it's diagonal, it means opportunity cost stays the same. We're going to look at the term productive capacity and how it's shown on the PPF, and also go into detail about the difference between productivity and productive capacity. So first of all, one problem for an economy that is producing inside its production possibility frontier, which we've talked about a bit in the past, and one strategy to overcome this problem. When a nation produces inside the PPF, it means that existing resources are not being used to their full capacity. So inefficiencies exist that could be due to high levels of unemployment or underemployment of resources such as labour, when the economy will occur when the economy is producing inside the PPF. To overcome this strategy, the government could put in place ways to improve resources, such as incentive schemes for employers to improve performance or productivity. That could include, so for a more practical one could be the government cutting welfare for those on unemployment benefits unless they're actively seeking work, or making it harder for some members of society to get access to welfare. So that might include cutting welfare for migrants or cutting welfare for parents once their children turn 6, with the intention of getting them back to work, getting them back to the workforce and contributing as fast as possible. Explain the meaning of the term productive capacity. Okay, these are two really important terms. You need to be able to define productive capacity and the difference between productivity and productive capacity really clearly. So productive capacity is the maximum amount an economy can produce with all of its resources or factors of production fully employed. It's often represented by the outer points of the PPF, or the most vertical section of an aggregate supply curve. It's the maximum amount an economy can produce if all its resources or factors of production are fully employed, which basically incorporates everybody that's included in the labour force. In terms of the difference between productivity and productive capacity, productivity is a measure of the efficiency with which how we use our resources. So it measures the output per unit of input. When we're talking about inputs, we're talking about land, labour and capital. We're looking at how much output we're producing per unit of input. Whereas productive capacity is the point in which production is at its maximum, as resources are fixed, production is limited by the availability of resources. But the key thing with productive capacity, it's when we're using all our resources as efficiently as possible and producing at our max at one given point in time. Okay. If we talk about something like raising the retirement age and why that's more likely to increase productivity or productive capacity, the idea is that when we increase the retirement age, it should increase the country's maximum potential of output because more citizens will remain as part of the labour force. So they're more likely to be part of the labour force still, therefore they're still working, therefore our overall potential output increases because more people are contributing to production. It may hurt productivity because productivity only measures output per unit of input. So while overall output is likely to increase if people work longer, you could argue that the level of output per worker goes down, particularly in in physically demanding professions, where older workers are potentially likely to be a bit slower in terms of how they go about their work. So it should boost our maximum capacity, but it may not increase our output per unit of input. In relation to discuss how the provision of government financial support to flood-affected groups comes at an opportunity cost. The provision of financial assistance to flood victims means the government funds that would otherwise be allocated to some other function must be devoted to the flood. So that might be education or health. In this context, the opportunity cost of providing funds for flood relief is the benefit that is forgone by not using the funds for their next best alternative use. This might be the benefits enjoyed by more health funding, assuming that health expenditure was the next best alternative. Making it really clear that whatever the next best alternative is the opportunity cost. If we devote more funds to financial support for floods, it goes away from that product or service. We'll talk about efficiency in the last couple of videos. Thank you.